One of my favourite workshops to run are vision board workshops. I've been running them for years, and although at the beginning of 2020, I don't think anybody had global pandemic on their vision board as something that they were expecting or certainly wanting, I found it interesting to look back at my vision board and my word for the year and find that apart from sitting on a tropical island, having a nice relaxing holiday, most things have been either achieved or achievable, notwithstanding the crazy year that 2020 is. And so I just wanted to let you know that I will be running my vision board workshop again. This time we're going to kick off at the end of November so that you have your vision, your plan, your dreams for 2021 already done, already set for when the new year kicks off. If you can make it in person, I have an in-person workshop. It's a whole day retreat on the 27th of November. We are going to work through a workbook, lots of steps of reflecting back on the year that was, dreaming about what could be, creating a plan, planning the plan. I'm going to help you come up with a word for the year, create a vision board, and leave with a plan that both inspires you and you can take action on for 2021. If you can't make it in person, you don't live in Brisbane, as I know many of you don't, but you still want to have a go or have a guided go at working through creating a vision for yourself. I have created an online video guided vision day workshop retreat that you can just run on your own. So either way, if you're creating that plan, dream, vision for 2021 is something that you would like to do and you'd like a little bit of guidance to work through it, then I would love to have you on board, either in a physical way or on a digital way. So head to annabellebateman.com/retreat and you'll find all the information that you need. I'll make sure the link is in the show notes as well. But let's have some fun casting vision for 2021. Welcome to Let's Talk Thyroid, where we explore different aspects of living a healthy thyroid lifestyle, positively and practically, to help you thrive and not just survive. Join me, Annabelle Bateman, your host, and let's talk thyroid. At the moment, we are doing a bathroom and laundry renovation in our house, which is kind of fun, but it means that I have moved my office from my office into the kitchen area, so it's a bit further away from all the noise, the banging and crashing. There's been lots of noise today, so the builders have just left, so I'm seizing this opportunity to record. But we do have a storm that's coming. So I just want to apologise in advance if there's a little bit of rain noise, and my dog really doesn't like storms, so he might get a bit huffy, puffy, panty in the background. So let's get chatting about thyroid and period problems. Not something that we always like to talk about, I understand that, but so important because our reproductive health, our hormonal health is so important to be on top of as women, and thyroid plays such a massive role in that. So let's dig right in and let's have a chat about how the thyroid relates. Like if you've got period problems, could they relate to your thyroid or not? What thyroid problems are common when you have an overactive thyroid, and what problems might be common if you have an underactive thyroid? And what can you do about it? What are some practical positive steps that you can take to get your periods back on track, to sort out your cycle, and just get on with functioning at your optimum so you can thrive in your everyday life. So let's go. I'm addressing this topic today for two reasons, actually. The main reason is I asked in the Let's Talk Thyroid Facebook group recently if anyone had any questions that they wanted covered on the podcast. And I got this fabulous question from Denna, which I'll tell you the exact question in a minute. And the second reason is in light of that question and in light of the fact that I, in a couple of weeks, will be interviewing Dr. Joni Larby, who is an expert in thyroid and menopause, I thought this was a really great lead-in question, actually. or lead-in topic. So Dana asks, how does hypothyroidism affect periods? I have heavy periods and take medication for it, but I've been wondering if it's all connected. And if it is, how do I look to improve it? So I think that's just fabulous questions. And so that's what we're going to ask. But first we're going to just address the connection between thyroid and periods and the whole menstrual reproductive cycle. Now, as you know, I come at this just from my own experience as a thyroid health advocate, I suppose, as someone wanting to bring a positive and practical voice into the thyroid space. I'm not medically trained, so if you want a really in-depth explanation of how the thyroid and the menstrual cycle are deeply connected, that's not what you're going to get from me now. But know, for one thing, they are connected. Every single cell in our body needs thyroid hormones. Doesn't matter whether it's brain cells, thyroid cells, muscular cells, or reproductive cells. We all need thyroid hormones. And that's why thyroid health is just so critical to be on top of. So I found this great explanation from Dr. Brighton online. You will find the link in the show notes to the full article if you want to dive into that. But she says thyroid hormone is essential for follicle development in the ovary, which is a necessary step in ovulation. It is also involved in brain hormone signaling to the ovaries, which is essential to a healthy menstrual cycle. So if that brain-ovarian communication is interrupted or the ovaries are unable to ovulate, then your cycles can become irregular. So there's this deep connection between our thyroid hormone and our reproductive cycle. And if our thyroid hormone levels aren't, I would say, optimum, not even just normal, then we're likely going to have things play out in this area of our health. So I'm going to cover both hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism separately. Dennis' question was about hypothyroidism, but I'm going to just put in some information that I found about hyperthyroidism as well. I did a fair bit of research for this episode because, look, to be honest, period problems haven't been a really significant issue for me in amongst my thyroid health. It's been a big issue in my broader family. So I think that's interesting, particularly with that thyroid connection being a genetic predisposition. So that's something, I guess, for my female family members to investigate. But I have been blessed to not have had too many problems. I didn't have trouble falling pregnant. I haven't had major period problems. I have had a slower cycle when my thyroid isn't operating at its optimum. But in general terms, I don't suffer badly from period problems. So a lot of this information is the research that I've done to put this episode together. It's not based on my own personal experience. So let's chat about hypothyroidism and the menstrual cycle. So remembering that hypothyroid is when we have an underactive thyroid. And the most common form of underactive or hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune underactive thyroid. Not all underactive thyroids are as a result of Hashimoto's, but most are. It's the most common. And we've just got to remember that when our thyroid is underperforming, that hypo, it's in a slow state. And that's why I guess this is often referred to as sluggish thyroid. If you have a sluggish thyroid, it's an underactive thyroid. And so when you think about that from a period issue, a reproductive issue, just think everything's running slowly. I guess that's a simplified version, but everything's running slow. So some of the most common issues that people with an underactive thyroid have with their menstrual cycle are irregular cycles. So when you think about that from that slowing down perspective, it makes sense. Although what's curious is that you can have either a more frequent cycle or a less frequent cycle. Both are common within underactive thyroid. So I think that's kind of curious. My take from it is if you notice changes in your menstrual cycle, that could be a flag to get things investigated. Whether you've got know you have thyroid issues or not. So if you know you do and you've got, you're noticing changes in your menstrual cycle or your blood flow, we'll come to that in a minute, then that could be a reason to check that your thyroid is operating optimally, or whether there's anything else you can be doing to support your thyroid, because remember that often sits behind everything. And if you're in the situation where you suspect you might have a thyroid issue but it hasn't yet been diagnosed, and you're having irregular cycles or changes in your period, then definitely worth getting your thyroid health properly investigated. So here's some of the things that I learned. Maybe you already know this, but for a more frequent cycle is considered to be a cycle that goes for less than 24 days. And a longer cycle is considered to be more than 38 days. Or if you skip a period, or you can even have no period, and it's considered to be no period if you haven't had a period for more than 6 months. So they're all common scenarios with a hypoactive thyroid. And I think that in terms of that irregular cycles and the cycle length and just even having a period, a sign of hypothyroid is actually if you're early to menstruate. So if you have thyroid issues, and we know that they're connected, like we have a genetic predisposition, and you have daughters, then maybe be alert that if they get their period young, and that's considered to be under 10, then that can be a sign of hypothyroidism. So that could be a flag to investigate that further. I'll come to the impacts that it has on the hyperthyroid in a minute. So irregular cycles is one of the most common problems for people with underactive thyroid. So let's call that number 1. Number 2 is heavy bleeding. Now, this is the question that Dana asked in the first place, and it's something that when I did a series on common hypothyroid symptoms a few months ago, it's definitely one of the symptoms. So there's definitely a connection. But what does that actually mean? Like, how do we know if our flow is heavy? So I guess one of the things is to notice changes. So as I said, sometimes it's when we only know our own experience, and so if something's different to how it used to be, then that can be a sign. But the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists have defined what heavy menstrual bleeding is, and this is some of the features to look for. So I didn't know all the answers to these, so I think if I'm 46, how old am I? 46, and didn't know all of these things, that's probably a slight on my knowledge about the menstrual cycle, really. But maybe there are others of you who won't know this too. So heavy flow is considered to be bleeding that lasts for more than 7 days. Bleeding that soaks through one or more tampons or pads every hour for several hours in a row. Needing to wear more than one pad at a time to control menstrual flow. Needing to change pads or tampons during the night. Or menstrual flow with blood clots that are as big as a quarter or larger. And I had to look that up because, being in Australia, we don't have quarters, but a quarter is about the size of a 10-cent piece. So just be aware to look for that too. So that's that heavy bleeding, definitely can be connected. Other sign could be painful periods, like if you're getting lots of, cramping and period pain, that is common with hypoactive people. I should have mentioned this before when we were talking about the irregular cycles. One of the things I discovered that I'm not going to go into detail here about, but if you wanting to really dig into this, I've got a link in the show notes, and that at different times at different stages of the menstrual cycle, they can be impacted differently by thyroid hormone. So I found a great article about that if you want to dig right into it. And so check that out in the show notes. And remembering that when we're having that irregular cycles, particularly if this phase of a menstrual cycle where we're ovulating isn't happening or it's shorter, that can have a really massive impact on fertility. And infertility is definitely a symptom of an underactive thyroid, and it's definitely one that we covered off a few months ago in the list of common thyroid symptoms. Very, very common, actually. And so if you are having trouble falling pregnant, please make sure that you get your thyroid levels checked as part of those investigations, because that can be an underlying cause of infertility. Right, so that's the hypothyroid. Let's now have a chat about the hyperthyroid. So remember that hyperthyroidism is when you have an overactive thyroid. That's when your body produces too much thyroid hormones. And the autoimmune version of this is called Graves' disease. And in general terms, your body runs fast. Like, that's where you can end up with tremors and heart palpitations. You can have trouble maintaining a healthy weight because you could tend to be underweight, hungry all the time. It's like, I guess, the other end of the spectrum of thyroid issues to the hypo. It's hyper. But I always find it interesting that many of the symptoms are similar, regardless of whether you're hyper or hypo. But the most common menstrual cycle problems for those with an overactive or hyperactive thyroid are absent or infrequent periods. So if you don't get a period, they're not happening very often, that is the most common abnormality for hyperthyroidism. Remember when we talked about the hypo, that if you got your period young, like under 10, that could be a sign of hypo? Well, curiously, it's the opposite for the hyper. I naturally would have thought it would have been the other way around, that if things were happening slower, your menstrual cycle would have been slower to kick in, but it's actually not. So you get your period really young, could be a sign of hypothyroid. If you have delayed puberty, which is considered to be not getting a period until you're over 15, it could be a sign of hyperthyroidism. So again, if you've got daughters and you've got thyroid issues, just be aware of that one. From a practical point of view, lighter flow and shorter periods are common for menstrual cycle. I'm not sure. I don't know. I get that that's a problem. It sounds like an upside for that problem to have a lighter flow and shorter periods. But the issue is that when it's not normal, it's not normal. And whether it's heavier or lighter, less frequent, more frequent, when there's changes, they need to be investigated so that you can get to the bottom of what's causing them and not just mask the symptoms. So I think that's really important. So they're the main problems, but as Dana says, well, if there is a connection, what can we actually do about it? So I'm going to give you some really practical things that you can do to help get to the bottom of it if you've got, these period problems that are related to your thyroid. So number one, I think I've got about 4 points. So number one, and I think this is the most important, is get your thyroid levels tested. Get them tested regularly, get them tested thoroughly, work with a health practitioner who really genuinely understands thyroid and hormonal issues so that you're getting the right thyroid tests. And make sure that when you're getting your thyroid levels tested, that it's really common to be what's considered to be the standard or the normal ranges on the blood test results. But if you're having period problems, you probably want to, we all should want to be in an optimal range, not just a normal range, but an optimal range, because we want our health to be operating optimally. And this is super, super important if you're trying to fall pregnant. Okay, so you need your thyroid to be operating at an optimal level. In the show notes, I do have a chart that I've shared that is from the thyroid pharmacist, Dr. Isabella Wentz, with the different reference ranges for what is considered to be optimal. Because if we're having thyroid period problems and they're related to thyroid, we have to get the thyroid functioning optimally. And that's where it's important to get it tested, to know what you're dealing with, to make sure you get your thyroid antibody levels tested so you know whether you're dealing with autoimmune thyroid problems, and to be working with a doctor, a naturopath, both, that really truly understand this to help support you from a holistic perspective. So that's number one. In my reading, I did say that getting your adrenals tested can be really helpful too. And I suppose that's, obviously to do with stress and inflammation and making sure that that's all operating properly. Just taking a quick second out to say that if you're having trouble getting your thyroid tested, like the full thyroid panel from your doctor, then you might want to consider using iscreen.com.au. That's i-screen.com.au. They're a private laboratory that can do a thorough thyroid panel for you, which you can then take back to your doctor and get a full explanation. But I have an affiliate link in the show notes. If you want to use that, I would really appreciate it. But know that you can get full investigation done. Obviously, best case scenario is you can talk to your doctor. Some of the additional tests, like your thyroid antibodies, could cost extra with your doctor. You can choose to do that. That's totally fine. If you're outside of Australia, at the moment I don't have any affiliates for testing outside of Australia, but within Australia, go to your doctor. But if you're not having luck with that, or you just want to sort this out yourself, you can use my affiliate link, go to iscreen.com.au and then take the results to your doctor and help them to interpret it. But here are a few practical things that you can do that can help support your periods. So number one was get tested. Number two is try maca root powder. Now, if you've listened to quite a few of these episodes, you might have come across discussion about maca powder. I just chatted about it with Jackie Isles and Michelle, and I have a feeling I might have talked about it with Bronte May, but I'm not sure about that one. But maca root powder, maca root is it's a herb. It's a root actually, and it's an adaptogen, and it can actually help your body deal with stress and hormone imbalances. It's regulating and balancing, not stimulating, and it comes from Peru and is sometimes called Peruvian Viagra. So, this is something that can be supportive of both male and female reproductive hormones. It comes in a powder form. You should be able to pick it up from a health food shop. And it's really easy to add to smoothies, bliss balls, that type of thing. And there are maca root supplements around too, I think. I've put some links in the show notes to some articles specifically about maca and menopause, maca and menstruation, and a few cautions around maca. It's not something you want. You just need a little bit in a smoothie on a regular basis would be what is worth a try, but of course do your own research and investigation into maca. Or maybe have a chat with your naturopath about that if you're talking with a naturopath about your thyroid health. It's something I've used from time to time. I do keep forgetting about it. Even after I spoke to Jackie, I'm like, I must get out the maca. I totally forgot. So after actually doing the research for this, I'm going to get it out and start adding it into smoothies, or I'll probably even sprinkle it on my cereal. That's probably an easy way for me. My muesli that I make with a bit of probiotic yogurt, dairy-free yogurt, that's probably the easiest way for me to use it at the moment. So the next practical thing you can try, lucky last, is essential oils. Now, doTERRA has a lovely women's monthly blend. It's called Claricalm. That can be really beautiful for rubbing over your abdomen when you've got your period or when you're ovulating, and it can help be nice and soothing if you're feeling discomfort. You can actually also use it all month long if you want to, or just at key times. So it's really a beautiful blend. It comes in a roller bottle, so super easy to use. In one of the essential oil I guess I call it a textbook called The Essential Life. I found a recipe in there for heavy flow. So if heavy flow, heavy periods is something you might want to consider this recipe. And again, this is in the show notes. So 6 drops of Roman chamomile, 4 drops of geranium, 3 drops of lemon, and 2 drops of cypress in a 15ml bottle, topped up with some fractionated coconut oil or other carrier oil, and massaged into the abdomen several times a day, starting the week leading up to when your period is due. So there's a great recipe to try. But, when I first chatted about heavy bleeding in this, this Common Symptoms series, I asked in the Let's Talk Thyroid community for people to share their experiences, and quite a few people shared their experiences of using essential oils for heavy bleeding. And so I just want to read you their comments and their experiences, because this might give you some other ideas of things to try. So one idea was to use Cypress Oil, mixed with some carrier oil applied topically. And this lady said that her longer cycles became more normal. So she said from 35 days down to 31 once she started applying essential oils to her adrenals. And she used 5 drops each of rosemary, geranium, elevation, and basil in a 10ml roller topped up with carrier oil and used daily over the adrenals. Another person says, I use a blend low down over my abdomen. She said, I use jasmine, cypress, clary, and clary sage daily, and also clary calm a couple of times a day. And then lucky last is another lady said, I found taking DDR Prime soft gels, which are an essential oil in a soft gel form, like a capsule, I suppose, for the week after I stopped bleeding, and it's helped me immensely. It's reduced pain, reduced the time, and the heaviness. So good. So lots of things to try there from an essential oil point of view. If you're looking for an essential oil and hormone resource, I thoroughly recommend following Dr. Maritza Snyder or getting her book called The Essential Oil Hormone Revolution. It's a really awesome one for not just, for the whole hormonal gamut, I suppose. She's got lots of really practical tips, ideas, understanding of hormones of all kinds. So hopefully that gives you a few practical things that you can do, some investigations some paths you can go down to investigate a bit more fully to really get to the bottom of what could be causing your period problems. So thank you so much to Dana for asking the question in the first place. I love it when the thyroid community tells me what you want to know. That means I can deliver what you want to hear about. And I'm really looking forward to chatting with Dr. Joni Larby in a couple of weeks all about thyroid and menopause. So, all these female hormone issues that we need to understand, get to the bottom of, and really, really manage well so that our whole lives can be happier and more functional and, and just all round more enjoyable. So thanks everyone for this week, for tuning in. And if you've got an idea for what a topic or a question that you'd like me to cover, please send me an email. I would love to know. And if I don't know the answer, just like I didn't really with this, I'll do some digging, some investigation, and keep my eye out for different experts to interview on that, on the topics that come up. Thanks everyone. Have an awesome week. Bye. Did you know that one of the things that I offer is a free 30-minute strategy session? So if you want the opportunity to sit down with me, talk about your health goals and make a plan, create some action steps, or just talk things through with someone who gets it, then more than happy for you to book in for a strategy session. I'll put the link to that in the show notes. Send me a message and I'd love to connect with you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. I would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast and share it with others that you know with thyroid problems. Let's get the message out there. If you'd like to connect with me further, the best place to do that is via my website, annabellebateman.com. From there, you'll be able to join my Facebook group, book a strategy session with me, download my freebie, and access any show notes for this episode. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
The information presented and discussed in this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease and should not be used as a substitute for proper advice from a qualified professional.